Good afternoon, all. On behalf of the Smart City Mission and the National Institute of Urban Affairs, I am Dipinder Kapoor from NIUA, welcoming you to the second webinar series on urban sanitation that we have curated for urban local bodies, Smart City Mission officials, nodal national training institutes, experts, practitioners, and others. The purpose of these webinars is to bring forth for discussion some of the immediate as well as long-term urban sanitation challenges and priorities emerging from COVID-19, using this online platform or opportunity for learning, discussion, and dissemination. In the first webinar we had on the 25th May, we discussed the scaling up of urban sanitation capacity building, where we invited a few national nodal training institutes and universities to share their strategies, ideas on both online as well as face-to-face offline capacity building work. In today's webinar, we have a panel of credible experts representing not only their esteemed organizations, but also the National Fecal Sludge and Septic Management Alliance, that has been working in India since 2016 for promoting septage and fecal sludge management. The topic of webinar today is sanitation worker safety and COVID-19 emergency response. All the panelists today on this webinar have done extensive work on this topic in the last 2 months since the lockdown has happened, and we are very happy to have them here to share their work and experiences. The session plan for today is that I will be introducing the speakers as they speak one by one, and then and each speaker will be making a presentation of about 5 to 7 minutes, and in the end, we hope to have a Q&A response. So the session plan is like that. All the Q&As have to be put forth on the tab which you see on the right-hand side of your screen on this BlueJeans platform. So to input your questions, and we will take them as they come, and we'll try our best to answer all the questions. So we will now begin. I'll just begin with a few 2-3 slides I had on this topic, and then I will introduce and ask Professor Chari to start. So I'll just put on just the introduction photographs of some of the sanitation worker safety, which I have, and also some of the presenters may have those similar photographs, but this is just for introduction. So this is the webinar we are having today, and we have 4 speakers with us. We have Srinivas Chari from ASCII Ahmedabad. We have Kavita Wankhede from IIHS Bangalore, Manvita Baradi from Urban Management Center Ahmedabad, and Dhaval Patil from EcoSan Services Foundation. And we had a set of ideas or questions which we expect the presenters will cover. Now, just on this topic, this first slide shows that the seriousness and the great work which the frontline sanitation workers are doing together with our health workers and nurses everywhere in India. So it is high time this issue is appreciated at the national level. And I think this webinar, we will try to focus on this issue based on our experiences in India. These are just some of the random pics I have of sanitation workers, safety protection wear. These are from their testing of their thermometers. This is on the septage desludging vehicle, the kind of protection gear they are adopting there. Again, full body gear and for sanitization of quarantine facilities and public places. Training for sanitation workers, which Kavita on the panel will also share, I'm sure. So this is all which I had to share as an introduction. Now I will introduce Professor Chari and request him to make a presentation. Professor Srinivas Chari is the director at the Administrative Staff College of India, a premier institution for public policy and capacity development in India. He leads the Center for Urban Governance and Environment, which is recognized as a center of excellence by Government of India. He is an urban environmental planner and public health engineer with over 2 decades of experience in urban infrastructure and sanitation delivery. He specializes in WASH services, and his portfolio spans policy, program, capacity development, and knowledge management projects at national, state, and city levels. He serves on various interministerial and departmental committees on WASH in schools, urban environmental sanitation, solid waste management, and urban development. He has supported the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs by undertaking independent appraisal of city development plans, reforms, implementation, and smart city proposals. He also sits on various committees of SBM, Swachh Bharat Mission, and is also a member of Government of India's Reinventing Toilet program, as well as the FSSM Alliance at the India level. And of course, he's a dear friend and colleague in the WASH sector. So I would request Srinivas to please start his presentation. And I think I will share his presentation while he speaks. So Srinivas, you can start. I will put on your share.
Thank you, Dipinder. Thank you very much for the introduction. So I will just outline some of the practical issues that we've been experiencing during not only during the time of pandemic, but even otherwise. Sanitation worker safety is super important for community well-being as well as for overall worker safety program in the water and sanitation space. So as we know that the scientific knowledge about COVID and the mode of transmission is still evolving. We are absolutely not completely sure about it, whether the solid waste is a carrier, whether the liquid waste is a carrier. So this data and information is still evolving. Given this uncertainty, and given that our sanitation workforce are directly exposed to both solid and liquid waste, it is super important to be extra cautious. We have to be super important to be redundant. We need to build a lot of redundancies to make sure that they are not exposed. They are exactly like health workers. So we need to be very, very sure about how we ensure safety to them, not only for their benefit, but also for the societal benefit. Next slide, please. As we know that based on some rough estimates, we have more than 30 lakh sanitation workforce in the formal sector, but on top of it, more than 2.5 lakh desludgers and public toilet operators and women working as ayas in schools. They are directly or indirectly dealing with different types of waste coming out of variety of installations. Some of them are containment zones. We have quarantine facilities, isolation homes, healthcare facilities. So waste is coming out, both solid and liquid, from all these places, potentially contaminated, and our sanitation workforce directly or indirectly are dealing with this waste. Next slide. Now, as I said, the waste can be broadly categorized into segments. We have solid waste, liquid waste, and sludges. All these categories of waste are potentially dangerous at different levels of risk, and our workforce who are dealing with public health and for overall benefit are actually sort of managing this waste, holding this waste, transporting this waste, and safely disposing this waste. For example, during the time of pandemic, even the domestic waste coming out of a COVID patient, if it is mixed, then the whole waste is actually contaminated. So it's very different to say that only biomedical waste is risky and domestic waste is not risky. In this current scheme of things, I think the whole waste is risk, and the sanitation workers who are dealing with this sort of waste needs to be extremely careful, and the city governments and the civil society organizations have a very important role to play so that they are not exposed to the COVID virus. Next slide. So you can see, just as Dipinder presented, We have workers dealing with solid waste. We have workers dealing with sanitary related waste. We have workers dealing with masks. We have workers dealing with drain cleaning, and these drains are connected to healthcare establishments. We have sewer systems getting choked, and they have to be cleaned, and people are directly exposed to different type of viruses including COVID, because many of these drains are again connected to the containment zones and healthcare facilities. And of course we have large chunk of desludgers who are actually picking up waste from septic tanks. And I would like to say that these septic tanks are connected to community toilets as well as public toilets, and the data is mixed. We are not very sure whether this waste has any potential source of contamination of COVID, but there is some global evidence to show that even the fecal waste as well as the feces is a carrier of COVID virus. There is some data coming from Bangalore as well as from Chennai. So given that, we need to be extra careful, and our sanitation workers should be looked at as healthcare workers, and same precautions or maybe even more extra precautions have to be given, have to be taken, and personal protective equipment should be sort of ensured that they are provided all the time. Next slide. Having said that, while there are regulations of CPCB and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare giving directions about how to deal with the biomedical waste, with regard to the waste coming from liquid waste, we don't have much of information. We don't have guidelines, very clear guidelines. I think we need to be careful about how the workers shall not be exposed to this liquid waste, especially in nalas and drains. So the Ministry of Environment as well as CPHEO has come up with certain guidelines, very broad guidelines, and I think every city and every facility should ensure that nalas as well as liquid waste contact points have to be disinfected using sodium hypochlorite, and all the STPs as well as decentralized package units are chlorinated without fail. As we know that in urban areas, there are thousands of package treatment plants in gated communities and in apartment blocks. Many a times these apartment blocks and gated communities do not do disinfection. So this is a time our workers can be exposed. So the call for action is that it's not only the governments but also the private installations have to ensure that the waste coming out of these facilities have to be disinfected, chlorinated sufficiently, so that our workers are not affected because of the contact with the liquid waste coming into the sewer systems as well as in the open drains. So these are some of the very practical things we should be looking at as city governments as well as private individuals and civil society organizations. Next slide. Last but not the least, I think we should be looking at ways of how the waste from septic tanks are carefully handled and treated. Fortunately, a couple of states like Orissa, Tamil Nadu and Andhra, Telangana and Maharashtra, they have fecal sludge treatment facilities, but in many parts of the country, FSTPs are not readily available. So they have to start looking at how to contain this waste and how to deal with this waste and disinfect the waste. So the simple rule of thumb is, if we do not have the comprehensive treatment infrastructure, disinfection is a way forward, whether it is centralized system or decentralized system, or even if it is a nalas and drains, we need to disinfect using sodium hypochlorite, or if it is a formal treatment system, through chlorination process. Finally, one area which is often ignored, even the national government has taken health insurance for healthcare workers, but sanitation workers have no insurance scheme. I think this is one area where we need to give a lot of attention. So I'll stop here with these ideas, and I would maybe we can take up some Q&A at a later point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Srinivas, and for laying down the broad contours of the topic today, and for sharing your experience and highlighting some of these important issues like the insurance one you did last time. From my side, I would just like to share this kind of advisories which have come from the Government of India and some state governments. So what I'm presenting now is just a brief kind of a fact sheet, more or less, on the advisories. And also there's just one slide on our experience of what an emergency response can be. So we are sharing here the advisories on sanitation and allied workers, we call it, because there are a lot of other workers which may not be sanitary workers, but which are allied sanitation workers, which need to be factored in. So these are the kind we have listed down 10 guidelines issued by the government of India, and as you will see, uh, majority of them, or 5 out of 10, are from the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. There are important guidelines from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, CPHEO, and Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. What we have also a slide which has hyperlinks to all these advisories, which we will share later as part of a package, so anybody can use that. But if you see in these advisories, most of these advisories were issued in March and April. So the first advisories which came were actually about how to deal with the COVID waste as a biomedical waste. So, for example, if you see the advisory number 3, waste generated during treatment, diagnosis, quarantine of COVID-19 patients, that came on the 25th March by CPCB, MOEF, CC, and also advisory on maintaining cleanliness during lockdown period. If you see advisory number 9, which also came from Mahua in March end. So if we see the trajectory, the first advisories were rightly relating with treating the waste emerging from quarantine facilities, treatment facilities, housing areas as biomedical waste. And slowly more advisories came on PPEs, on rational use of PPEs. So they came later, much later than the first few advisories. Then we have listed here 3 advisories from the state governments, which we have, there must be many more, and we have got hold of these 3 advisories. The one is from Telangana government on welfare and protection. This was one of the first advisories which came from the state and from where Chari is based in Hyderabad. Then safety measures of FSTP, which are called fecal sludge treatment plants. The government of Odisha was the first state to come up with these guidelines. The first slide, which I was saying, was about the guidelines issued by the government of India. I won't repeat that, but just to give a recap that the initial guidelines were meant to treat the COVID waste emerging from households and other facilities as biomedical waste. And these guidelines came early in March. And in April and now in May, more guidelines which are related to PPEs and sanitary workers protocols, they came in March, in April and May. And these 3 guidelines which came from the state governments were relating with, we just listed it out because they are very specific and which are very specific to the state. For example, Odisha is the one state which has these fecal sludge treatment plants. So number 2 advisory has emerged from Odisha and no other state. Similarly, on advisories for maintenance of cleanliness during lockdown period, which is again a state advisory. So while all central advisories are compulsory, some states have also come up with their own. Now, if we look at the type of activities and risks involved and link it with the guidelines, so this table we have tried to do that, and we have tried to identify the kind of category of which Chari was mentioning, different those through photographs. Here we have listed it out in terms of categories and functions, the kind of protective gear which is prescribed by the advisories and the name of the advisories. So I will not go through the entire table, only to say that all this is there, which is available, and we have all compiled it as the Alliance in a resource book, the link of which will be shared with you at the end. Some of the systematic challenges in addressing emergency response, which at NIUA we did for Uttarakhand, we realized that the first challenge was knowing how many number of workers are there on your payroll, contractual and regular. Then only on that basis you can actually plan a response for sanitation worker safety. Then in planning a response, you need to identify the type of care, need of care, quantity, and that is based on again your number of workers you have. And the third priority is operational, which is we learned in this health sector, for example, they had a strategic deployment of doctors, nurses, paramedical staff. So some amount of strategic deployment of sanitation workers to handle hotspot areas, to handle quarantine areas, to handle and then a set of workers which handles public places, and a set of workers which does other kind of work, so that you have two or three kind of deployments and they don't mix, and there is a strategic war-like deployment is required. And then of course there is needs to be effective monitoring of your sanitation work and people's engagement, because without that you don't know where to deploy, how much to deploy. And finally, the challenge of disposal of infected waste material, which we are getting from a lot of our responses from our cities. So this is all which we have compiled in our platform at scbp.niua.org. And you can see from there is a COVID link, and there all the materials are being compiled in a resource code. So I would just end here, and I will now proceed to introducing Kavita Wankhede, my colleague from Indian Institute of Human Settlements, and ask her to make a presentation. Kavita has a master's degree in city design and social sciences from the London School of Economics and is trained in architecture, urban design, and social sciences. Kavita is a faculty member and a program and a senior lead at Indian Institute of Human Settlement, and is currently a senior lead practice. She leads the Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program that is working in Tamil Nadu for a statewide scale-up of urban sanitation, including fecal sludge and septage management. Kavita has managed the International Curriculum Development Project at IIHS with a team of over 180 leading academicians, practitioners, and policymakers from across the world. She has also co-led the IIHS program for working professionals in urban development and tested an interdisciplinary Masters in Urban Planning framework. She is a faculty member of IIHS Labasna support team as well. So I would request Kavita to make her presentation, please.
Dipinder for the introduction and for inviting me to this webinar. Good afternoon, everybody. So there is some overlap with presenters before me have spoken, so I'm going to take it very quickly, some of the slides. This is again to actually reiterate what Dipinder ended the thing with, that, and Professor Chari also alluded to, that actually across the full chain of sanitation, there are many kind of workers and roles. And there are two classifications that one can do. One is according to the role, and other, more importantly, by the contractual arrangements. And to reiterate what Dipinder said, that it's easier to kind of account for people who are directly either on the ULB payroll or contracted by ULBs, but there is a lot of people who are either privately employed or independent, and it is really difficult to get databases for this. So this numbers you see are from one city in Tamil Nadu, and it's taken us a while just to get the numbers correctly. The whole point of also putting out saying that there are different roles is also that everybody will have different requirements for PP, something that Professor Chari alluded to. So we've been working with sanitation workers for some time now in Tamil Nadu, and we have worked during COVID. So I'm just going to quickly show issues during COVID, and like Dipinder said, that this is really a conversation, this is an opportunity not only to talk about what is the worker safety issue during COVID, but also how can we continue this post-COVID and in a longer time frame. So very quickly, what we've been doing in Tamil Nadu with the help of helping the government of Tamil Nadu in select districts is basically, one, we did a rapid assessment of sanitation workers. Secondly, we helped distribute PP in some locations. We put out safety guidelines, we've done health camps, and we've also ensuring connecting the workers to the government scheme which exists, because in some cases they're having difficulty accessing it. So talking about the first thing, this is from the rapid assessment we did, and the point here I want to bring out is that most of the sanitation workers actually received the PPE, but not all of them were receiving it regularly. Plus, some of the PPE was not suitable and they could not use it. And also the kind of PPE that was available varied across the towns. And this is not really a commentary on what was done during COVID, but I think the point of the slide is that if we, as all of us in our cities, need to ensure PPE has to be there, it's not a one-time effort. We need to have a sustained effort, make sure that the PPEs are reaching the workers continuously at regular intervals, and also that they are appropriate to the types of roles that was mentioned earlier, as well as usable. These are the guidelines that we had brought out, illustrated guidelines, and Dipinder spoken about the guidelines, so I'm not going to talk about it. But to reiterate the point that Professor Chari made, that there is a risk matrix, there is a varying degree of risk for sanitation workers, and one has to keep in mind. And the second really point I want to really highlight here is that how do we make sure that these practices, these guidelines reach the sanitation workers? Because for those who are directly employed by the urban local bodies, those who are even contracted, there is a database, and they come for work, and this can be then disseminated as a video or a poster. But there are large numbers of informal sanitation workers who are not there, and we were able to put together some of the numbers from places like Just Dial, or because we had contact of the sanitation workers, but that was we could reach only a certain number. Many of these people also don't have smartphones, so whatever we assume, whether it's a picture or a video, and we think we will be able to disseminate. And this again, I would say it's not an issue of during COVID how do we disseminate, but going forward, how do we really reach out to the informal workers who are out there and who are not in a collective that we can reach out to one of them and it'll get distributed. This is another good practice, I would say, that is being done in parts of Tamil Nadu, I'm sure other states also, is there's regular health screening for sanitation workers when they report into work. What we also helped with was actually, we found that many of the sanitation workers were stressed because of the nature of their job, like we've been discussing. It is high-risk job. They were worried about their families. They also sometimes didn't have the proper information. So we just linked them to some of the NGOs who work in this area and arranged for group counseling sessions to clear their doubts and address some of the anxiety issues they've been having. And now we've done it in around 5-6 towns in Tamil Nadu, and it's really been helpful for the sanitation. So this is our work during COVID, where we've been helping the government as far as possible. But I just want to end with two things which are relevant for safety. One is saying that right now a lot of focus is either on the personal protective equipment PPE, or it's on protocols, which is how do we various things that we talked about. But if you look at it, these two are actually the bottom of what is called this hierarchy of safety controls. And as we move on to a longer and a medium-term solution, we really need to actually be addressing the top parts of the pyramid. So actually looking at where can we substitute manual work with machines, where could we have better equipment, not just PPE, but better equipments to help them. And this is something I would want to people to keep in mind as we move on. The second thing I want to say is that often we say that the workers are not using PPE, and sometimes it's true, and it's not during COVID, but that they're given PPE and they're not using. But when we did work with them, we realized that they're not using PPE because they may not see it as value for money, in a sense that if they're private workers and procure it, maintenance costs are high, they may not know enough. So I don't want to go into the details, but often it's if we want them to adopt PPE as a way of life and for their own safety, we must understand what are the problems they are facing and why are they not using PPE. This is and during COVID, this is something we asked them about. What are the issues that you see once the lockdown is lifted? And as you can see, many of them are financial. Again, the reason I bring this up here is that because pre-COVID, we felt that, okay, they're not using equipment, they don't want to use equipment, safety is not important. But I think we must admit the reason why probably for them the safety is not important is probably because they've got other more critical issues, what they perceive as more critical. And with the lockdown and going beyond this, there may be this will amplify it. So we really need to present safety to them within the context of their overall life and the economic problems for them to think it's important, because otherwise we keep on giving them a PPE and they may not end up using it. Just to summarize that, I think safety is not of sanitation workers especially critical right now, but it is a deep-rooted problem and it is systemic and requires work over a period of time. PPE is not just a one-time issue. There are issues of ease of use, appropriateness, etc. We must focus on things other than PPE. I think that we should move from safety to actually health, whether it's organizing health camps, whether it's organizing counseling sessions. And the last 2 points really is have better interaction with the workers themselves to understand their issues and then identify those things that will enable uptake of PPE and other safety initiatives that we may have. Thanks.
Thanks, Kavita. Thanks for your presentation, for sharing your experiences, and also highlighting this important fact that while we are talking of COVID and emergency response, a lot of requirements for PPEs are actually general requirements. It should not be just seen as a requirement for COVID and basic emergency requirements for protection gear or even insurance. These are something which are long term and should not be just seen as a 1 month proposal or a 3-month initiative to be taken from now on. I would now like to introduce Dhaval Patil and ask him to make a presentation. Dhaval Patil is one of our youngest panelists. He specializes in integrated wastewater and septage management and is an expert with multidisciplinary technological innovations in WASH. He specializes in sustainable sanitation and water management, in environmental engineering and design of decentralized treatment systems for wastewater treatment, sustainable solutions for water management, and for civil engineering aspects related to building construction and management of projects. He has worked with NIUA and with the National Fecal Sludge and Septage Management Alliance on several of our training modules and on our guest lecture series. Dhaval represents EcoSan Services Foundation based in Pune, and he is a co-founder also of Saniverse Environmental Solutions and a Chief Technical Officer of Waywear Consulting.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll be presenting about the PPE market in India currently in terms of COVID-19 response, as to how India is tackling with the shortage of PPE at a national level. So as a current status, Ministry of Textile, Government of India has regulated the market of COVID-19 PPE in India. There are 8 labs who are testing and certifying the manufacturers of different PPEs. Currently there are more than 600 such certified manufacturers. On a national scale, the projected demand for India was that of 2 crore PPE kit. When I say PPE kit, it consists of 6 different things. The most important thing is the coverall or the hazmat suit, which has to be worn by the health professionals when they are in the quarantine zone of the hospital, or they are coming directly in contact with the COVID patients. The other components of these kits are a face shield, mask, the shoe cover, and gloves. Mitigating this demand of 2 crore, India has already placed an order of 2.2 crore PPE kits, out of which 75 lakhs PPE kit has been, the order has been completed through domestic manufacturers as well as some of the imported kits. Currently, India is manufacturing more than 4.5 lakh PPE kits per day, and this number is sure going to rise to 10 lakh PPE kit per day. In the last 2 months, it's astonishing that PPE industry in India has grown by 56-fold. India is second largest COVID-19 PPE manufacturer in the world. But the journey to this position was not that easy. So let's look at the timeline of the events which were related to PPE. In January, the first case of COVID-19 was seen. Immediately, the national government took a decision of banning the export of PPE outside India. This was taken from a point of view that more and more PPE will be needed in India, and the demands for this PPE is going to increase. However, in next month, when the cases were really less, this ban on the export was taken off, and soon most of the PPEs were actually exported out of India. In the first week of March, when the government of India mandated the Ministry of Textile to regulate the PPE in India, in less than 10 days, the ministry came up with certain framework to deal with the situation. There was a company, HLL Lifecare Infrastructure Lifecare Limited, who was instated at a national level for procurement of PPE. The main goal of this agency is to make sure that the quality control is happening for the PPE kits. Similarly, there was one lab which was identified, South India Textile Research Association, which was certifying the PPE manufacturers. And soon, within 2 days, there was again a ban on PPE as well as the raw material which is required for PPE, because this was the time when there was a complete shortage of raw material for the PPE. In 4th week of March, when the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare issued the guidelines for PPE manufacturers, they also came up with guidelines for rational use of PPE. This was in line with the current situation, because the demand of these PPE kits was increasing on a daily basis. You'll be quite surprised that during that time, India on a national scale only had 60,000 PPE kits, out of which almost 50% were imported. So going forward, China had donated few PPE kits to India, and soon, according to the framework, more laboratories were added for certifying the manufacturers, and more manufacturers were also certified to produce non-woven fabric. This is a very important raw material to make the coverall, which is used by the health professionals.
Yeah, this is where Dhaval was on his trajectory of projecting how India has started producing the kits from the day one to now. I'll just complete it for him because he has been disconnected somehow by maybe electricity connection or some other issue. So the hurdles which he has mentioned in his presentation are shortage of supply, relating to specifications, relating to mechanical equipment for producing these, knowledge of manufacture of PPEs, non-rational use of PPE, awareness about hazards and risk. So these are general hurdles of both production and usage of PPEs, which he has mentioned. And I think this is his last slide, which says, in a non-risky environment, you're depriving a healthcare worker from his job if you don't yourself, adhere to the PPEs which are prescribed. So I would like to thank Dhaval that although he could not complete his presentations, and we will go to the next speaker from here. Dhaval is there. Dhaval, can you please make any concluding remarks now?
Yes. I'll just I'll just finish. This is the last slide. So initially there was a shortage of supply on the manufacturer's side because of the human resources and the mechanical equipments were not available, and there were a lot of logistical challenges in place. Also, it is interesting to see that these coveralls, which are required now, was not a major demand in India before the pandemic, and hence there were only 50 manufacturers who were making a very similar kind of coverall. And still, the PPE manufacturers are struggling with making protective yet comfortable PPEs. Also, quality is one of the concerns, as a lot of manufacturers have jumped into the market because of the high demand, and hence quality is neglected. The most important point which is I want to make here is non-rational use of PPE. Non-rational use of PPE is leading to a pseudo sort of shortage of PPE on a national scale. The countries used a technique called national stockpiling of PPE for pandemic. There are a lot of research papers on this, one can see. And lastly, it is this picture clearly shows the point which I want to make, that to safely roam into a relatively non-risky environment, we are depriving a healthcare worker or a sanitation professional from doing his job, who is in dire need of these PPEs more than you on an airport. So those were my concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhaval. A couple of questions also, Dhaval, are there, which are saying that we observed most of the surgical masks as a waste during our household hazardous category, coming under our household hazardous category. How to deal with it, and also complaints of substandard PPE kits. So, what about this disposal of these kits?
So currently, the disposal of these kits should happen along with the biomedical waste. Since these kits must, like these PPE, might have come in direct contact with the COVID patients. But that's the point which I wanted to make: non-rational use of PPE. For normal people who are going to go out for buying groceries or to general stores, they don't really need surgical masks. A triple layer cloth mask, which can be reused multiple times after washing and disinfecting, is more than enough. So we need to carefully understand what kind of equipment one needs to use while going out.
Okay, thanks. I'll come to our last speaker now, and Dhaval, you can see the list of questions and you can respond to some of the questions which are there.
I will.
So I will now come to Manvita. Manvita Baradi is the Director of Urban Management Center, an organization working towards professionalizing urban management in India and in South Asia. She is the Professor and Founder Dean of the Faculty of Management at the SET University, Ahmedabad, and has set up a 2-year postgraduate program in urban management. She has technical experience in developing and administering programs for local governments, capacity building for local government associations, urban and regional planning, citizen participation, municipal performance measurement, and international development. She is on the expert panel for sanitation under SBM Urban. She is the head of the technical support unit of the National Urban Livelihood Mission of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Therefore, she brings in her presentation, she will share the work not only which they have done in Ahmedabad or to UMC, but also their engagement with the National Urban Livelihood Mission. So thank you, Manvita.
So thanks, Dipinder, for the introduction and inviting me to this webinar. Indeed a pleasure to be speaking to the audience here. We are going to talk to you about health and safety of sanitation workers which were involved in. So next slide, please. The issues, next slide, yeah. So issues faced by sanitation workers in our work we've seen is they are stigmatized, they're considered unclean, they have some or no protective equipment. And we've seen in the COVID times that at least the formal employed workers from municipal end at least get something. But and as Kavita also mentioned, the informal workers get hardly anything, or they are asked to bring their own. So they have to buy their own masks and come. There is unfair treatment on wages, poor contractual mechanisms, where awareness and insensitivity towards them, because even if they want to come and collect your waste, the housing society and the colonies don't allow them to enter, considering them unclean. Instead of helping them how to come to your society and help out, they are considered and they're beaten up, or we have heard those stories. There's no provision of insurance, as already mentioned by Dipinder. And there has to be a periodic health check, which is right now not done in most of the cities. Their lack of facilities to maintain hygiene. It's required they wash hands frequently, but none of the muster stations or when they're assigned work, there is a hand wash facility. Next, please. Occupational risks, and we all know, here I have summarized some, they've come into direct contact with fecal matter, though it's not been established that liquid waste or fecal matter might be considered, might be carrying the virus, but they do come under in this risk. The diapers, the children fecal material also get into waste, and hence that is also a concern. They work in confined and often dangerous spaces, which also could probably get infected. There's a risk of getting the musculoskeletal or disorders due to manual labor, because they have to carry weights, and infections and respiratory disorder due to exposure of harmful microbes. There is a risk of course, the chemical hazards, and now people have been using indiscriminately all the infection, the materials which are to sanitize spaces, and sometimes the chemicals are hazardous to them, so that's a big problem. Next, please. We have seen number of deaths, and we've recorded as per the newspaper articles. It's not appropriate to stigmatize and not get them what necessary equipments and PPEs and deaths because of direct exposure to the infected individuals. There's a risk of transmitting to their family members when they come back home, and higher risk of disinfectants, as I mentioned. The public hostility has also to be looked at and worked upon. Next, please. We put together what kind of compensation, because to respond to this crisis, many state governments and city governments have come up with some incentives. Now, as you can see on the screen, Delhi has put out 1 crore rupees to be given to on the death of as a compensation if on duty, if a sanitation worker is on duty. Punjab about 50 lakhs, Karnataka 50 lakhs, Amritsar as a city 30 lakhs, Gujarat 30 lakhs, Tripura 25 lakhs, West Bengal 5 lakhs. One-time monetary benefit of Telangana and Tamil Nadu about 5,000 to 7.5 thousand rupees as a benefit to them. And health insurance, West Bengal and Punjab has 50 lakhs, but Bengal has taken insurance of 5 lakhs per sanitation workers. Now, these are some attempts, but it's not contingent upon, it is left to the state, but nationally no advisories have come on this. Next. So, having said that, most of our speakers have spoken about where do we go from here? What can we all do? Next. So, what we have been doing is as part of our NULM program, which is a National Urban Livelihoods Program, we feel collectivizing sanitation workers into one fold, or manual scavengers, so to say, into one fold would help. And that would be in form of SHG, the self-help group. This is very well mandated on National Livelihoods Mission. And what can happen is we can map their skill. We can give them training. We can also, there could be subsidized loans under the SCP component of the NULM, because loans could help them to at least procure some of for the private sector or people who have been working as informal sector workers into some more finance. The registration of sanitation workers at city livelihood centers also become very important, which is not right now happening. But these are things which we can look forward to. And you can see in the bottom of this in a bar chart that per state, what kind of SHGs have been formed. And these are some numbers to let you know that it's a varied response. But a collectivized voice of these people would really help city governments to give them what they duly should be given to them. Next, please. Also about the skilling. So we've tried to put together 3 qualification packs, which is mandated under the skill sector. How do septic tank technicians should work? What are the eligibility? What kind of training is required? So it becomes in a formal process of getting them trained and then put into the field. So that is one course which is now available in the construction and fabrication of different types of septic tanks and soak pits, because we have seen in our studies that even the design is faulty, the technicians are not ready, there are different ways so certification of this kind will help. So this is now available, and city governments should look at it and get certified septic technicians as well. FSTP, operations and maintenance, another qualification pack which has been created. It is carried out for day-to-day operations, and these technicians are also available now in the market if they've done these courses. The desludging is an important aspect because most of our cities do not have sewage connection. They are dependent on the on-site sanitation. Desludge these septic tanks. We need operators who could do this work much more in a trained manner, and hence this pack would be really, really useful. Next, please. So these are now available as handbooks, and you can. This has been done with the NSDC, the Green Jobs Council, and as our organization, and it's been disseminated to many organizations and city governments now. You can go to the next slide. Now, this is one aspect of skilling and getting them to do work as they're supposed to be doing. We also are in discussion with the Odisha state government, and how do you systematically work on safety, equity, and dignity of sanitation work? Can there be a scheme? Can there be a method in which we get them enumerated, get them skilled and placed? So there are 3 things we are discussing here. Standardized delivery of sanitation work, which would ensure sanitation work which is regulated by the government agencies in a proper manner. There could be an ensuring that sanitation work is carried out under professional supervision. There has to, the second point is building ecosystem for safe and dignified sanitation working environment, which would ensure them fair and standard wages. They'll get appropriate equipment and machinery. They get assurance of model contracts, SOPs, ensuring public health and safety of workers, like periodic testing of their health, giving equipment, and also talking about their housing and their families. And we've seen the migrant crisis. And most of this work is done by people who've come from are not trained or are not really looked after well. And we know about this. How do you get them financially inclusive and give them insurance or retirement benefits? So this has been discussed in great lengths in one of the states. And the third aspect is how do you create skilled workforce? As I said, the qualification packs are ready. We just have to have city governments to agree to not only employ people who are more skilled, but also have a method of skilling them and feeding them into the formal system. So these are my thoughts and our way forward. I guess this is my last slide. So Dipinder, yeah. So this is what we as organization, we would like to put it very firmly to the audience that we should work in this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Manvita. Chari, is there and Dhaval are there? Are there any closing remarks you would like to give?
I'd just like to say that I think while we discussed quite extensively about solid waste and associated risks, which the guidelines were put out by CPCB and it's stated extensively, I think it is time that we bring out similar guidelines for worker safety, dealing with liquid waste, because the minute monsoons come out, the drains are going to flow, there will be chokages in the cities and small and medium cities also. So there is a potential risk of contaminated liquid waste getting in touch with workers. So one has to be super careful about it. The evidence is not very clear. However, we should take extra precautions, particularly because many of our towns have partial sewer systems without any treatment. Many towns do not even have a sewer system, so they just let it out into open nalas and drains, and septic tanks flow directly into stormwater drains. So I think this is an appeal, also request for the community who are associated with this worker safety programs to start building evidence as well as start creating awareness among city governments with regard to safety of workforce and disinfection of the liquid waste wherever there is a potential contact point. Thank you, Dipin.
Kavita and then Dhaval.
I want to just reiterate that I think we are placing a lot of attention to this because of COVID, and in fact, not us, but one of the other NGOs working with sanitation workers explicitly said that we are being remembered now in this moment of crisis and will be forgotten once it subsides. So I just want to reiterate that the hows and the exact protocols we can debate. There will be differences, but I think as people who can do things, this agenda should not slip even post-COVID. That's the key message.
Okay. Manvita, there are some people wanting your email ID. If you can respond on the Q&A, then just do that. Dhaval, would you like to have some closing comments, please?
Yes. Sure. So safety, occupational health and safety is one such subject which should not be only talked about during pandemics, but also should be discussed on a daily basis in industries, especially such as sanitation. Sanitation is the sanitation workers are the very first point of contact for most of the pathogens which are resulting into waterborne diseases. And PP or the other hierarchy of controls, like Ms. Kavita had shown in her presentations, should be focused during the whole project life and not just during the pandemics. And also my last suggestion would be to do your bit by not using or not irrationally using PP and creating the shortage for the healthcare workers and sanitation. Thank you.
Okay, with this, I think we should end because people do get impatient with a long webinar. So thank you firstly to all the speakers, Jari, Kavita, Manvita and Dhaval for sparing your time today. And thank you for the Smart Cities mission to anchor this and share this webinar with all the smart cities as well as other ULPs. So thank you once again and goodbye.